climate change. It's an issue many young Americans are very passionate about, but will it motivate them to go to the polls this November? ABC News White House correspondent MaryAlice Parks traveled to Pittsburgh to report on the effort to turn out voters who care deeply about what's happening on our planet.
Emily Church is a biologist turned activist.
I'm aiming for around 80 today.
Knocking on doors in Pittsburgh, she tells me she used to spend time pushing lawmakers on climate change, but lawmakers told her voters didn't care. She set out to prove them wrong.
The people who prioritize climate and the environment need to show up, and that's how we're going to get anything done.
If the voter comes to the door, basically just follow the script.
The Environmental Voter Project is targeting very specific voters, environmentally conscious citizens, often young people and people of color, who rarely head to the polls.
We're leaving a personal touch. And just that little nudge.
Of all the ways to work on climate change, why this?
Because people who vote or who politicians pay attention to, and so they make the decisions, and so we need people who care about the environment to vote.
And that's our biggest problem in the climate movement right now. We don't have enough voting power.
The group's founder, Nathaniel Stinnett, says they've had some success.
We've sometimes increased turnout as much as 1.8 percentage points in general elections, 3.6 points in primaries, and 5.7 points in local elections.
Okay, if I'm being honest, that doesn't sound like a lot.
Ask Donald Trump how big a deal 1.8% is in Pennsylvania, and I'll tell you, these are big numbers in this business. Really big numbers.
The group is nonpartisan, though acknowledges it's almost exclusively Democrats right now working to address climate change. They hope they can push Republicans to come to the table, too.
We want to scare the bejesus out of as many politicians as possible, no matter what side of the aisle they're on, until they think, you know what, the only way I can win elections is if I start recognizing the biggest crisis that humanity faces.
But that's no easy task.
By definition, the people who haven't voted historically are going to be harder to turn out and to convince because they've already exhibited this behavior of disengagement with the process.
Across the board this election, registered voters list immigration, the economy, abortion, and democracy as their top issues, with climate change not even making the top 10. Partisan and generational divides at play. But young voters, even young conservatives, are more likely to say it matters.
Young voters in general tend to be more democratic, but that is kind of tied up inextricably with their belief that climate is really important. So if Republicans don't want to basically be losing this up-and-coming electorate by large margins for decades to come, they're going to have to eat into that Democratic support by at least proposing some solutions and addressing climate change.
All politicians are motivated by winning elections. And so we just want to build up that demand in the political marketplace for environmental leadership, whether you're a liberal or a conservative.
Even the Biden White House, which has prioritized fighting climate change, pushed by young progressives, a key part of the Democratic voting base, to do more. Last summer, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre interrupted by a protester over the administration's approval of a new drilling project in Alaska.
I think there were some missteps by the administration. Permitting the Willow Project in Alaska was a step backwards. That was unfortunate.
What do you say to those young voters who argue he hasn't done enough?
Well, the fact is President Biden has done more to address climate change than any president in U.S. history. And there's a lot more to be done. I talk to a lot of young people and young voters who are questioning whether or not government can solve big problems like the climate crisis. And Joe Biden is working hard to show young voters that government can do good things.
On this issue, the choice before voters is stark. President Biden has pushed renewable energy solutions, backed electric vehicle infrastructure, and created a new climate corps. While former President Donald Trump has opposed Biden's clean energy policies and promised to roll them back.
Scientists have said that we still can avoid the worst of the climate crisis, but what we do in these next few years is essential to which path we choose.
Nathaniel agrees and says too often Americans have been told to focus on their own small habits and not big policy.
Hey, don't pay attention to that coal-fired power plant back there. Instead, it's all your fault for having a plastic water bottle in your hand. And we bought it. We bought it hook, line, and sinker, when in truth, It is far more of a political and a systemic problem that needs political and systemic solutions.
It's a slow day, very few people home. But a scientist at heart, Emily appreciates their data-driven approach.
We have randomized controlled trials for each kind of outreach, so we know this is working.
It's an uphill battle, but for Emily, finding and activating these new voters is worth the fight.
Scientists do generally feel a sense of urgency on this issue, and as I said, the science is very clear, so we know what we need to do. It's just a matter of getting it done.
Our thanks to MaryAlice Parks for that.